Hello, beautiful sacred souls. My name is Alison Batty Capps of Blossoming Heart Wellness. And today I wanted to talk about something that I have seen in the spiritual communities, in wellness communities, and on social media about the idea of authenticity. And based on my lived experience, my educational background, my level of healing, I think that sometimes people are misunderstanding this. So I'm going to give my take on this, which is based on my own understanding, based on my education on psychology and spirituality and neuroscience and healing. This is just one perspective, so find the perspective out there that resonates with you. This post is called Rethinking Authenticity, and it is a trauma-informed spiritual and neuroscientific perspective on what authenticity is. And it is a script that I have written, so I will be reading, but I hope you'll stay tuned. It is important information, and I wanted to make sure that it was clear and articulate, and I didn't want to leave anything out. So I am hearing a lot of people talking today about this idea of authenticity. And oftentimes I hear people saying things like, well, this is who I am, so take it or leave it, or I'm just being honest. But I have observed that often this version of authenticity isn't actually coming from the heart or from a healed space. It actually appears to be coming from unprocessed hurt or trauma responses or nervous system deregulation. And I want you to know that this isn't to shame anyone who's doing that. It's just to bring awareness to what I believe true authenticity means based on my understanding of what a healed state looks like in the nervous system as well as with the frontal lobe on mine. So I want to gently explore what authenticity really is from a spiritual perspective, from a psychological one, and from a neuroscience lens on how we can actually embody a version of authenticity that is compassionate, self-aware, and truly healing to not only ourselves, but to others. So let us explore the misconception of authenticity versus what I observe is actually reactivity. So many people think being authentic means saying whatever you feel without thinking about it or without considering the consequences of how it will be received. Oftentimes people think that authenticity means just reacting in the moment, being blunt because it's just honesty, or refusing feedback because you just want to be accepted for who you are, or avoiding growth because change is uncomfortable. But that's not what true or healthy authenticity actually is. This is instead unfiltered emotion mixed with protective patterns that were developed in childhood. So from a trauma-informed perspective, this makes sense. There's no shame where people are at. It means that our nervous system learned to protect us long before we learned how to regulate or express our emotions. So sometimes when someone thinks they're being authentic, what they're actually doing is reenacting an old survival pattern. Let's explore the neuroscience behind this. So when we are triggered by something that we perceive in our external environment, whether it be a person or something we encounter, the amygdala fires. The amygdala is responsible for our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, which is our nervous system's reaction to perceived danger. It is the part of the brain that takes over and disconnects us from the frontal lobe. Now, the frontal lobe shuts off when the amygdala gets activated, and the frontal lobe is actually the part of the brain that is responsible for compassion, empathy, insight, collaboration, adult healed perspective. So we often feel like we are just being real and authentic because the reaction feels so intense and because we're experiencing it feels true. But the truth is that we're actually expressing our protector, not our authentic self. Now, this isn't a personality flaw. This isn't a broken brain. It is actually physiology. It is how the body was designed to function. But it does not mean that it is authentic communication, because that actually only happens when we are in a regulated state and have insight with the frontal lobe fully online. So, what is true spiritual and psychological authenticity versus the voice beneath the wound? Well, from a spiritual lens, authenticity is the voice of your inner wisdom. It is intuitive, grounded, compassionate, and it comes after the pause of self-reflection, not before it. The spiritual and psychological self does not need to defend or attack. It speaks from clarity, not from fear. So, true authenticity actually happens when we slow down, listen inward, and identify and differentiate between our wound, our child parts, our protective self, and we get more in line with the higher, wiser, more rooted part of ourself. So authenticity is actually speaking from the deeper, wiser, more rooted place. So true authenticity does mean naming the original hurt, not reacting from it. So one of the most important skills we can develop in adulthood, if we didn't have opportunities to develop it in childhood, is the ability to name what we are feeling underneath the initial reaction. So the first emotion that we experience in response to an external trigger might be something like anger, or frustration, or defensiveness, or irritation, or even withdrawal. But that is a protective mechanism. Beneath that are actually the emotions that hold where the hurt lies, where the fear lies, where the confusion lies, where the disappointment lies, where the longing for connection lies, where the shame lies, where the feelings of being unseen or unheard lie. So authenticity isn't about expressing the protector emotions. It's actually about naming the emotion and the pain underneath it. It is doing it in a way that is trauma-informed and understands that we do affect other people with our behavior and words. It is our ability to emotionally regulate ourselves versus reacting from the emotion. True authenticity is actually compassionate understanding that what we say and do impacts others, and we should try and do and say things that are kind and collaborative, and we should be open to connection. So an example of this might be, instead of saying, "I'm just being honest, you upset me and my reaction is valid," authenticity sounds more, well, when you said X, Y, and Z, that made me feel small and unseen, and I felt triggered and angry and defensive. And I want to share this with you so we can understand it and unpack it together. This version of authenticity builds relationships rather than rupturing it. When misused, authenticity actually blocks growth and breaks down relationships. Using authenticity as a shield often prevents people from taking accountability of how their behavior and actions impact others. It actually prevents the ability to repair harm in relationships and develop connection. It affects our ability to learn better communication styles. We all have some level of unhealed communication styles. It's part of being human. That doesn't make us bad. It just means that we have some healing work to do. But it is our responsibility as human beings to learn how to communicate in healthy ways. And that is what leads to growth in our emotional maturity. And it helps us connect in more deep and healing ways. When we don't do this inner work, it keeps our unhealed wounds locked inside in trauma-driven patterns, and this blocks us from aligning with our higher nature from a spiritual perspective. So authenticity is not the rejection of growth, it is actually the pathway into it. All right, so this might be triggering for some, but let's explore what real mature authenticity looks like. When authenticity is integrated with self-awareness, it sounds something like this. My feelings matter, and so does my impact on others. I'm noticing a really strong reaction inside me. So I'm going to pause here to understand what's really going on. I want to express my beliefs and experience in a way that brings me closer to the person rather than creating a rupture between us or criticizing them. My truth is important, and so is the other person's truth. So is compassion and understanding one another's perspective. Well, I'm willing to explore where this feeling comes from so that I can better express why I'm hurt, and we can collaborate on ways in ensuring that both our needs get met. These types of authenticities feel safe, they feel connected, they feel intentional, and they are deeply healing. That said, authenticity is a practice. It is not a personality trait. So authenticity emerges when we understand what a nervous system that is deregulated looks like, and we learn how to regulate ourselves so that we can approach things from a calm and regulated body. It means developing emotional literacy. It means spiritual grounding. It means healing our trauma. And it means being willing to take accountability for how we impact others, not just what we intended to do. This helps us be compassionate, not just for ourselves, but for others. Authenticity is something we grow into that we may not have learned how to do in childhood. It is something we become as we heal. Authenticity is not, this is who I am, and I am rigidly not going to change. You just have to accept me. Although it is valid to want to be accepted for who we are, it is important for us to understand how we impact each other. So it is, this is who I am becoming as I learn to tell my truth with clarity and compassion. If this resonates with you and you want to cultivate a deeper sense of self-awareness, emotional clarity, and spiritual embodiment so that you can truly embody what authenticity means, I invite you to explore these themes in my book, The Divine Within, Healing Ourselves to Heal the World, which is a guided step-by-step practice of how to develop self-awareness and heal your inner wounds so that you can live from that more compassionate and authentic presence. If you want support and want to work with somebody in a mentorship perspective, you can go to my website, blossomingheartwellness.com, to learn more about how to work with me. I want to really preface something about my perspective and about my understanding about healing, and I want to kind of reflect that these are my experiences based on my level of healing. So it is important for us all to find our own perspective on things and not to just believe what somebody says based on what they are saying, because we all come to understand what healing is from different perspectives based on the experiences we have. I tend to argue that we know what truth is for us and what a healed state is when our body feels warm and expansive and safe and grounded, and we feel loved and we feel accepted. And that when a teaching or something that we're experiencing feels like contraction inside our body, it is an indication of something that is unhealed, either in ourselves or in the other person. And true healing begins when we understand where that contraction comes from and we move towards finding ways to release it or shift it. Again, find your own path to healing. If my way of approaching the material resonates and leads your body to feel open and expansive, then I might be someone you should stay in touch with. I'm sending you deep love and appreciation for who you are and where you are on your journey of healing.